Welcome to the Growth Minded Accountant podcast, where our experts will share best practices on running your firm in the digital age. This podcast is brought to you by CountingWorks Pro. Let's get started.
If you hear the phrase capture advisory insights during tax season and your immediate reaction is, I don't have time for that, then this episode is for you. Because let's be honest, no one wants more work in March. Your heads are already spinning. You're about to explode. You're working multiple hours. You're basically completely maxed out. But here's the shift. This isn't about doing more. It's about not losing what's already happening right in front of you. And recently we've been talking about open-ended questions you can ask during the tax interview, how to start an interview, how to close an interview. And at this point, we're now going to teach you how to collect the insights from that interview and then make them a revenue opportunity post-tax season. So every tax season, firms surface dozens, sometimes I don't know how many clients you have, but you might have hundreds of opportunities. And a lot of these are advisory opportunities. And then you watch them disappear after April 15th closes because you didn't make any notes of them. You didn't follow up proactively. And this isn't because they weren't valuable, but it's because there was nowhere to put them. What do I do with this? Where am I putting the notes? There was no time to act on them. And then more importantly, there was no system to bring them back together later. So let's be clear. The problem isn't insight. You already have that. You're meeting with clients. You're at the time of your appointment or your interview is probably the closest you're going to be with them that year. The problem is capture. So this week, we're going to talk about how to capture. So, let me give you a couple examples. A client casually mentions that they're hiring later this year. Another is thinking about selling a property. Another says, hey, I wish I had known that sooner. And then that moment you think, oh, that's important, right? I should come back to that. But then next client, next return, next fire to put out. And maybe even if you remember the insight, you're like, wait, was that Joe or was that Susan? And then it's gone, right? So multiply that by hundreds of clients, and that's lost advisory revenue. Most importantly, that's lost client impact, and that's lost positioning. Rebecca's favorite part. Rebecca, say hello. I started this whole thing. I didn't even say, hey, Rebecca's here with me.
Hi, everyone. No, this is going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so what are we actually listening for? And it's not just numbers. You're listening for change, right? Growth, hiring, expansion, AI integration, R&D, right? Risk, selling, restructuring. You're looking for frustration. I didn't know. I wish, next time. Opportunity, new income, investments, transitions. And here's the key. You don't need to solve it in the moment. You're obviously in a compliance meeting. You're not in an advisory engagement. You just need not to lose it. So let's start off with some different techniques that I would suggest that kind of help surface some more things and more importantly, help you follow up with this after tax season. So if you want to surface more of this naturally without slowing things down, just tweak your questions, right? So, what's changing this year? Anything coming up we should plan ahead for, right? Simple, open-ended questions. What decisions are you thinking about that we haven't talked about yet? Or we haven't gone thorough enough yet? And you're not extending meanings, you're just unlocking some signals, okay? So here's the rule. One sentence, one place, one tag. And that's how you can start capturing this information. So the client hiring in Q3, considering selling rental. Where do you put this? You put it in your CRM. For CountingWorks Pro and our CRM, we have a notes section. And it basically is inside our client hub. So any information that you can add to that notes section can be followed up later with technology. And we use a tool called Max. And I'm going to show you later on how a playbook in Max can actually automatically follow up and present your proposal, your outbound email, time it, when it will go, when does it trigger, and I'll kind of go through that. And then, some sort of follow-up tag, right? So planning after tax season, there's no new system here. There's no extra time. You just don't lose it. So if you're not using kind of an AI-enabled client hub like CountingWorks Pro, you can still do this, but manually, and we're going to talk through how that works. So, and this is where this starts compounding, right? So those notes that live in an AI-native secure system, they just don't sit there. They become searchable, they become context, and they become actionable insights. So now you can ask, who's mentioned hiring? Who's thinking about selling? What are the planning opportunities? And instead of guessing, you're responding to real client intent. And that's what turns compliance into advisory. And that's what tools like Max help organize and surface that. But in the real win here is the habit. So let's go over that. Capture, store, surface, and then act. Okay. And Rebecca, this is where I want to bring you in. As anything, we like to, is this an opportunity if people are asking the same thing that maybe we could turn that into proactive outreach content and blog articles, because that's where visibility and growth really intersect. So we talk about marketing all the time. I'm setting you up. I'm sure you're going to have a great little segment here. And not all firms have the time to do some of this, but guess what? That's why you listen and you see what conversations are happening. And then after tax season, you can come over the game plan. If you're using technology, it makes it much easier to deliver on. So, Rebecca, what do you have to add here?
I have a few things. So one of the biggest missed opportunities that I see when I talk to clients is that they're really sitting on a massive gold mine of information and insight from their clients. They don't realize it and they don't do anything with it. And it's all piecemeal and it's maybe floating around in their heads. Like you said, Lee, there's no system for organizing this information. But once you have the data and you're tracking it in a meaningful way, even if it's just a tag, this doesn't have to be something that takes you a long time. Like you were saying, it can be a sentence, it can be a single tag. But once you have that data and you go back to it after tax season, you will see patterns emerge. So every time a client says to you something like, wow, I wish I'd known that earlier, or what do I do about this? Or asks you a question, and you might notice your clients asking the same questions. This is an opportunity for you to create marketing materials, to create content, to create videos. This is what your clients are looking for from an advisory standpoint. So capturing it ensures that you don't lose the language they're using, you don't lose the topics they're wanting to talk about. So then you're just going to go back to writing generic blogs, generic emails, generic website copy, because you're going to have lost all of those insights without capturing them and putting them in a system. So really what you're doing is you're creating a marketing plan that geo engines and SEO engines are going to pay attention to. So the more you pay attention to your clients, the more you can create niche content and begin owning spaces that have high volume searchability within your clients' demographic. So if you target medical professionals, for example, and they're all sort of asking you the same questions during tax season, and you're taking these notes and creating a system where you can see exactly what things you need to follow up about from an advisory standpoint, you're going to have built-in content for the next 3 months, the next 6 months, based upon this data and these insights and the information that you're collecting. So this is really a great way to start building a desired niche, building your client base, not only upselling your existing clients, but reaching other people within that market who are going to have the same needs, who are going to be asking the same questions, who are going to need the same types of advisory services. So this very simple way of tracking insights can actually turn into a huge opportunity for you from a positioning and marketing standpoint.
Yeah, and I think it's the goal here is to reflect your clients back to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what visibility is all about. So you're almost, just like the algorithms, discovering trends that are going on in the culture, so to speak,
Yeah.
inside your own client database. And by now tackling those as subjects for your blog topics, your email campaigns, perhaps even some advisory services, niche positioning, you're now becoming not necessarily louder, but you're more relevant, right? And the relevancy comes from listening to your clients. And then when you start feeding these algorithms and Google content, and more importantly, your clients, because you only surface X number of things through your current client base. Think of how that client base looks like. Again, you did medical professionals, so there's lots and lots of medical professionals. I'm sure they're asking the same questions. Where do they go? ChatGPT. Ask the question. Who gets surfaced or referenced? Lee Reams and Associates, because I wrote about this. I became the expert in this. If there was a problem to be solved, the chances of them perhaps reaching out to me are much higher. So I think it's really important. It's a really easy way to, everyone, you're trying to figure out, what do I write about? What do I want to put on my website? What do I want to put on social? What do I want to put on LinkedIn? This is a great source or resource for you that does a lot of the thinking for you, and then you can run with it in a lot of different ways. So
And I think one thing to remember is that if people are asking it in a sit-down meeting, they're searching for it. So those same questions are being asked online. So by addressing the questions that you're getting in person on the web, you are really setting yourself up for success, because those are going to be the high volume searches, especially if they're timely, especially if they're related to things going on in culture and that sort of thing. So I think what you said is really greatly, and just remember that what you're hearing in person is going to translate well to the internet, because I think that's something where there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes. And those two things do really tend to align.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I always like to talk about, okay, yeah, this makes sense, Lee. I don't have time, or is it really worth it? So what is the ROI of advisory? All you're hearing now is advisory, advisory, advisory. Compliance is going to die. You see, I saw another tech startup coming out with a AI tax prep product. Um, I believe the future is about your client relationships. I don't know which tax software is going to win, if there's going to be an AI tool that actually is 100% accurate or not. I still have a lot of doubt, but I do know that your job is to protect the relationship you have with your clients, no matter what underlying tech you use to actually deliver the services, right? So the more you can find advisory opportunities, I think the better the ROI for you as well. So let's say you capture 20 meaningful insights during tax season. Out of those 20, you follow up with 10. Out of those 10, just three turn into advisory conversations. Each one turns into a 1,500 tax planning engagement, perhaps, or a $3,000 annual advisory relationship. That could be $4,500 to $9,000. I think the opportunity is much, much higher if this was CFO advisory and you're talking $2,000 a month and you get three of them. Well, 2 times 12, that's 24 times 3. You could do the math, right? And that's where I think it becomes really, really profitable. This isn't a new marketing campaign. This is not a new lead gen campaign. I don't have to hire some consultant to help me brand it and to position it and write it. There's no extra meetings in March. Just capture it and follow up with it. That's the ROI. And I think that's where most firms are leaving many opportunities on the table every single season. And I see it. I guarantee you, I just went through my own tax interview. I led the questions telling my advisor what I'm doing. The questions weren't coming back to me. So let's get practical. How can you use this as insight, right? So what do you actually do with it? So at the end of a meeting, soft verbal close. Hey, this sounds like something we should revisit after tax season. Do you want us to circle back on that? That's it. Now you got it. Acknowledge it, position the value, right? And gotten permission to follow up. If they do that, let's schedule it, right? It's a strong signal. Let's go ahead and get something on the calendar now for May. Done. Now it's not a note anymore. It's a future advisory meeting. And then from there, inside my CRM, I create a simple to-do list. So create a task, follow up on hiring plans, tag it post-tax advisory, assign it, May, June. That's it. No long notes, no complexity, just capture, tag, assign. And that's now your future pipeline is building itself. What we did at CountingWorks and Max, I actually created a workflow that you create a tag, let's call it post-season advisory. You put in the notes section in Max, in our CRM, you basically, and I would want a little more notes than just one line, maybe 2 or 3 notes, get a little bit of detail. The more detail we have, Max will be able to turn that into a full-on narrative, right? So that then could take a playbook that auto assigns its start date. It can create an outreach email, perhaps with your calendar invite in it. It could create a playbook proposal that is based on what that question is. It can actually create the questions that you should ask, and even a tax plan or a financial plan around that specific notes that you took during tax season. So what does that do? That prepares you for the meeting. It helps you monetize what that meeting is all about. It sets expectations for your client, and it's a quick, easy, yay, I want to do this, pay me, and then you have money coming in, right? So you're not creating more work. You're capturing future revenue. You're capturing future impact because advisory doesn't start in May. It starts in March when you're actually meeting with clients, right? That's when what clients tell you really matters. So if you don't capture it now, it won't feel important later. And if it's not important, it won't happen. So keep it simple. As everything, keep it simple. One sentence, one place, one tag, because one sentence today can mean literally thousands or tens of thousands if you're a bigger firm, hundreds of thousands, and more importantly, better client outcomes tomorrow. So that wraps up another edition. We try to keep these fast, quick, whatever, during tax season of the Growth Minded Accountant podcast. I'm trying to just give like little snippets, things that have huge benefit, huge ROI if you follow them. We'll continue this through April 15th. And then we're going to get into some really exciting topics that can really move the needle post-tax season. So hopefully you're enjoying having a successful one. We've heard some really positive things from our client base. So until next week, again, thank you for the comments. Thank you for the subscribers. And again, thank you for viewing and being a part of our community here at the Growth Minded Accountant Podcast. So until next time, we'll talk later.